Nandana Jaya Buddha-Ranjana Jaya Yamuna Tirunachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Yamuna Tirunachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava. Jaya Vishnu Pada Brahmamsa Privicharya C.C. Bhakti Venanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jaya Vishnu Pada Brahmamsa Privicharya C.C. Satata C.C. Mad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Gaudiya Vaishnavinda Ki. Iskcon Guruvinda Ki. Iskcon Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Gaura Premanandi. All glories of simple devotees. All glories of simple devotees. All glories of simple devotees. All glories of C.C. Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 7. Lord Krishna instructs Uddhava, Text 2 and 3. So I'll just read text 2 and then we'll chant text 3 responsively because it's the only one that has the purport. Maya nishpatititam hiyatra deva karyam asheshata yaratam avitirnoham ameshenha brahma arti tata. Answering the prayer of Lord Brahma, I descended within this world along with my plenary portion, Lord Baladeva, and performed various activities on behalf of the demigods. I've now completed my mission here. Text 3. Kulam Vai Sapa Nirdhagdham Nakshati Anyonya Vigrahat Samudra Saptame Hi Enam Purim Cha Plavashishati Kulam Vai Sapan Hirdhagdhang Nakshasiti Anuyanya Vigrahat Samudra Saptate Hienhang Purim Cha Blavishyasati Kulam Vai Sapan Higdhagdhang Nakshasati Anyonya Vigrahat Samudra Saptamehinhang Purim Cha Plavavishyati Kulhang Vai Saptanighagdhang Nakshasti Anyonya Vigrahat Samudra Saptamehinhang Purim Cha Plavishvashyati Ladies. Kulam, this Yadu dynasty. Vai, definitely. Shapa, by the curse. Nirdhagnam, finished. Nakshishati, will be destroyed. Anyonya, mutual. Vigrahat, by a quarrel. Samudra, the ocean. Saptame, on the seventh day. He, certainly. Enam, this. Purim, city. Cha, also. Plavavishyati, will inundate. Translation. Now, due to the Brahmin's curse, the Yadu dynasty will certainly perish by fighting among themselves, and on the seventh day from today, the ocean will rise up and inundate this city of Dwarka. Report. In this and the following verses, Lord Krishna indicates to Uddhava that he should immediately fix himself in self-realization by giving up all identification with the material world. Srila Jiva Goswami has pointed out that the Yadu dynasty was not actually destroyed by Lord Krishna, but merely removed from the vision of the world through the curse of the Brahmins. Similarly, the Lord's eternal abode, Dwarka, can never be drowned by the ocean. Nevertheless, all external approaches to this transcendental city were covered by the ocean, and thus the Lord's abode remains inaccessible to foolish persons in Kali Yuga, as will be described later in this canto. By the Lord's mystic potency called Yoga Maya, he reveals his own form, abode, paraphernalia, pastimes, entourage, and so on, and at the suitable time he removes all these from our mundane sight. Although bewildered, conditioned souls may doubt the spiritual potency of the Lord, the pure devotees can directly perceive and relish his transcendental appearance and disappearance, which are described in Bhagavad Gita as Janma Karma Chame Divyam. If one faithfully accepts this perfect knowledge of the Lord's transcendental nature, then surely one will go back home, back to Godhead, and become an eternal companion of Lord Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhuttare Shivatati Krishna Goswami Iti Namini. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhuttare Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namini. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nivasesa Sunivadi Pasadaya Satarana. So, stated here, although the bewildered, conditioned souls may doubt the spiritual potency of the Lord, and this means basically atheism, which is becoming more and more prominent as Kali Yuga progresses. Just like Prabhu said, that the universities today are the slaughterhouse of the mind. Why is that? Basically, it turns people into atheists. And we have practical experience of this. My family, my two brothers never went to college. They just entered the military. I was a college dropout after 1 year. I had one professor who said, the first day of class, he said, I don't even want to be teaching this class. I'd rather be writing my book. So I'm thinking, you don't want to teach, why should I want to hear from you? And so me and my roommates, we actually dropped out of college and went looking for a guru. But we're reading some metaphysical books. Unfortunately, it wasn't Prabhupada's books. I didn't find those till a couple years later. But I realized that, we realized that we weren't really learning anything. My sister was the only one who went to college all the way through, and she's the only one that is an atheist. So, of course, many people go to universities. I'm sure that some of you have graduated. But because you have a faith, you already have faith in God, therefore you're not going to be swayed by the materialistic. But people in America, they don't have such strong faith. So they can easily be dissuaded from religiosity. And the scientists, they put forth their ideas, that the whole universe was not created by God, but it was a big explosion. And from that explosion, we don't get chaos, we get the universe somehow or other. And the scientists, they're proud of their rocket ships, their spaceships, and they may fly for some time, but eventually they have to land. But no one's thinking about these planets, these much greater spaceships that are flying through space. And the planets created by Krishna, they're able to maintain all the living entities. Everything is there. Water, food, everything is provided for, the sunlight. They don't give any credit to God for that. I can remember in third grade also, when I first heard about how the earth is revolving by the gravitational force from the sun. And it is also 93 million miles away. So I was thinking, even in third grade, how is it possible? It's 93 million miles away and it's held in space by just the gravitational force of the sun. Or look at the planet Neptune. NASA sent a probe from Earth to Neptune, and it took 12 years to get there. And Neptune is so far from the sun, it's practically all ice. The temperature is about negative 330 degrees Fahrenheit. But the Neptune, they're saying, also is being pulled by the sun gravitational force. No. Prabhu says that they're held in space by the mystic potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just same way Lord Ramachandra floated the rocks on the ocean. So they don't want to give any credit to Krishna. It's like if you see there's countless millions of planets like this. We're not the only planet. Although scientists have said we sent probes to all the planet, this is the only planet that has life. No. God is not so foolish. Probably gives the example just like the person that built the Empire State Building. They're not just renting out the bottom floor and all the other floors are empty. That wouldn't make sense. God is not such a foolish owner of the universe that only this planet has life. There's life on all the planets. Just like we read in the Bhagavatam, Vivishan, the sun god, even on a planet completely engulfed by flames, there are living entities there. Just like here on Earth, it's like 71% water. Our bodies are 60% water. So on the sun planet, they have bodies which are made of flame, so they can survive. Just like scientists have discovered, they go down to the bottom of the ocean where the pressure is so great, that people cannot go there unless they have encased in special lead suits. They find living entities that are alive down there under such great pressure. So there's living entities everywhere. So just like you see sometimes when the sun is shining through the window, you see all these dust particles floating in the air. Similarly, there's planets like this scattered through the universe, floating out like little dust particles. And then on these planets, we see living entities like here on Earth, who living entity is so infinitesimally small, 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. But we're trying to usurp that was created by God and claim it as ourselves. And we're creating all these, they mark different countries and they try to divide it up perfectly and make these different nations. But it's ridiculous because all these nations, their object is to create misery to the other nations, right? Just like Russia wants to attack across the border and take over Ukraine. Different nations are just causing distress to the other nations. And these universes, and they take their spaceships, they think, oh, we're going to go to the end of the universe, and we're going to discover, and by doing that, we're going to discover how the universe was created. Even if they can go to the end of the universe, which is described as being 4 billion miles in diameter, even you get to the end of the universe, there's coverings of the universe. And it's described that the first covering is Earth, which is 10 times as thick as the diameter of the universe, which means that covering of the Earth is going to be 40 billion miles. And then on the other side of that, there's water, which is 10 times the size of the Earth covering. So it's going to be 400 billion miles. And then fire, another 10 times, it's going to be 4 trillion miles. And then air, 40 trillion miles. And then ether, 400 trillion miles. So it's described that with the coverings of the universe, and the universe in the center of that will look just like an atom. But they think that they can pierce through that and find out the source of the creation. It's not possible. It's like the first man to go into space, a Russian cosmonaut. He got up in space and said, "Oh, there's no God up here. Therefore we were right." There is no God. But here, how to get out of this material coverings, how to get out and find God, as described here. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo vati tatvata tyaktva deham purna jamati. What is it? Purna. So just by understanding a little bit of Krishna's appearance, Janma, karma, his activities, then one can faithfully accept the knowledge of Krishna's nature. You'll surely go back home, back to Godhead. And become an eternal companion of Lord Krishna. So one doesn't have to understand Krishna fully, but just a little bit of understanding of Krishna's activities, his appearance, is enough to free one from these material coverings. Just like the coronavirus is so small you can't see it. It enters into your nose. It can kill you, possibly. Or probably gives an example, just like one drop of cyanide is enough to kill a great elephant. So similarly, just a little bit of understanding about Krishna, his activities, appearance, is enough to get us out of the material world. And what keeps one in the material world? That is described here in the beginning of the report. We identification with the material world, and we identify it by misidentifying ourselves as a spirit soul with the material body and trying to react with the material world through the senses, material senses, meeting the objects of the senses. And sense gratification, Prabhu said, is what keeps the living entity in the material world. And through sense gratification, he may experience some type of happiness, but he doesn't realize that happiness is the ultimate enemy of the living entity. Because that happiness through sense gratification can never fully satisfy someone. Probably gives an example, just like pouring gasoline on the fire is just going to make the fire blaze stronger. In the previous uses, like in Yuga, when people lived for 100,000 years, they spent 60,000 years in meditation, and 100% of living entities achieved perfection. So they were all in samadhi, and being in samadhi, they had no desire for sense gratification. They didn't even think about it. In Treta Yuga, they could experience sense gratification without any of the tribulations. And then Dwapara Yuga, the material suffering was introduced, but it was not so stringent. Stringent material miseries were introduced in Kali Yuga. So therefore, Krishna is telling Uddhava here, you should immediately get out. This is the beginning of Kali Yuga. When Krishna left the planet, that's when it went from Dwapara Yuga to Kali Yuga. And we see here in America, where they have luxuriously, solved the problems of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. But still they're suffering so many social problems and disease that is pounding it's threatening their very lifestyle. They go far as to, convince people to attack the capital institutions. And the people are so intoxicated, consuming, vast quantities of alcohol in the form of beer, wine, and whiskey, and the drugs like marijuana and hashish, even hard drugs like cocaine and heroin are readily available, even in the rural areas. And the military is so much intoxicated, one wonders if they'll even be able to be clear-headed enough to fight the next war. And so, washed in intoxication, they're so ignorant that they, apathetically throw up their arms when they see lawlessness is rampant through society. Even walking on the street is dangerous. So many people have weapons, and people are afraid to even call 911 when there's a disturbance in their house, because there's cases of the police killing the people that dialed 911. They're there to protect and serve. You're not safe in your house, even if the door is locked. And the bridges are collapsing. And the economy is affected by, the stagnant mass production and persistent, inflation. And, there's rapid unemployment. Even I know teachers who who don't even have enough money for their school supplies. They have to buy them themselves. And mass transit systems are slowly dying, and not slow death. And then, but the illegal economy run by organized crime is flourishing. And what do the politicians do about it? No, nothing. They just practice their facial expressions for their TV and rile up the masses by fear of, oh, the real problem is these dirty immigrants coming across the border, taking your jobs. So they don't provide any real service to the country or their constituents. It becomes like a joke, practically speaking. And then the previous presidents who are exposed as being total frauds and convicted, write, and their staff write best-selling books that they make great fortunes off of. And the rest of society is only interested in increasing their sense gratification to the greatest degree while doing the least amount of work. And the me generation of reformers has been replaced by the hedonistic, the me generation has replaced the reformers, I mean to say. And social reformers with their hedonistic idea of, just dancing their derrieres to the beat of drums, slashing guitars and lewd lyrics. Well, the real kings of society, the producers of mass products, are interested in, selling using every psychological trick in the book to convince people to buy their products. It's well documented that the cigarettes and alcohol and meat is bad for your health, but they don't hesitate to use every trick they can to convince people to buy these useless and even harmful products. And the chemicals that from their factories, which are polluting the air and the earth and the water, as long as they're able to convince people, to consume their products, they could ignore the puny outcries of the environmentalists. So that's why it's described in the Bhagavatam. Kali Yuga means dosha nidha. Nidha means ocean, dosa means false. It's an ocean of false. So Krishna is, because of this situation we're experiencing ourselves, Kali Yuga, is telling Uddhava to get out of this material world. But even though Kali Yuga is described as ocean of faults, there is one saving grace, is that we don't have to perform meditation like they did in Satya Yuga, or perform elaborate sacrifices in Treta Yuga, or the deity worship, Dwapara Yuga. But simply one has to just chant Hare Krishna, and that is enough to reach perfection. The one saving grace of Kali Yuga is inaugurated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu 500 years ago when he began this Hare Krishna movement. So it's described that even the demigods, they are lining up. They want to take their birth in this Krishna consciousness movement because it is the easiest way to get liberation from material world. To get liberated from material world is usually not so easy. The impersonalists have to go through their process for many births, and even then, what do they achieve? They achieve liberation in the Brahmajyoti. But in the Brahmajyoti, it cannot be satisfied. They have to come back into the material world. Why? Because the nature of a living entity, it has to interact with other living entities. It cannot be alone by himself. It's like I remember when I was in Korea, we had this, one so-called yogi. He went up in the mountain for 6 months, but then he had to come back down. Everyone was praising him. Oh, you stayed on the mountain for 6 months doing your meditation. But then I pointed out, yeah, but he had to come back down. He couldn't stay there. So the same way, a living entity cannot be satisfied in the Brahmajyoti. He's not experiencing any reciprocation with other living entities. Because the nature of the soul is to be a servant. There's not any incident in your life, if you examine it, when you were not rendering service to someone. So the same way, just like the sugar, you cannot see it anyway not being sweet. Or you can't experience fire that doesn't give heat or light. So same way we always have to render service. The parents serving their children render some service to the parents. Husband serves the wife serves the husband. Even a person living by themselves, you see, they'll get some dog or cat and render service. Right? So now they have a law that when you go out with your dog for a walk, the dog defecates in the street, you have to pick it up. So even the big CEO is taking his dog for a walk, he has to pick up the stool of his pet. So everyone is doing some service. But what is that eternal service that we do? What is the eternal Sanatana Dharma of the entity? That eternal relationship is with Krishna. We serve Krishna in 5 different rasas. We have to serve. That when we realize that, then we'll reach perfection. Because that service will never stop. It's like the husband serving the wife. One of them eventually will pass on. So that service will stop. But that service that we enter to Krishna will never stop. It is eternal. So that is the goal of life, to fix our mind on Krishna, to render service to Krishna and to Krishna's devotee, to render service to the spiritual master. In these relationships, then we'll find a real happiness and satisfaction, because that happiness is not based on the senses and the objects of the senses. Just like, we just had a blissful kirtan. Everyone was happy, chanting and dancing the names of the Lord. But if I was to say, instead of chanting there, let's just go to the nightclub and dance there to the rock music, nobody here would be satisfied doing that. After we finish the lecture, we'll have a nice prasadam feast. And say, well, instead of having that feast, let's just go to McDonald's and eat some hamburgers and French fries. No one is attracted to do that. Say, well, let's have a nice nectar drink. No, let's not do that. Let's go to the bar and drink some beers, some fermented grains or fermented fruits. No, we're not attracted. Because we have experienced that paranavista nivartate, that higher taste. It comes through service to Krishna, associating with devotees, taking Krishna prasadam. This is the real happiness. We have experienced that. We know that. So all we have to do is invite more people to the party. Because people are out there and they're suffering and they don't even realize, that I'm eating some abominable foodstuffs made from blood, mucus, bile, bones, and semen. What's the attraction? They don't even, they're so encased in ignorance, they don't realize what they're doing. So we are very fortunate that we've come in contact with Krishna consciousness and meeting the spiritual master, taking instruction from him, and making our lives perfect. So we have to propagate this movement as Lord Chaitanya instructed, that everyone should become guru. It means to give this knowledge to others. And the easiest way is through distributing these books. Because all this information that we have, all this knowledge we have, is right there in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, any of these books that we give out. Prabhu said just reading one line is enough to change a person's life. It's like I have a godbrother that became a devotee. He didn't even meet the devotees, but he just had Prabhupada's books. And just by reading this, he became convinced. He started chanting Hare Krishna, offering his food, became a devotee. So that's the spiritual potency of the pure devotee. Prabhupada says in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, there's so many, translations, hundreds of translations of the Bhagavad Gita, but not one devotee was made. But Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita made thousands of devotees. That's how potent they are. So we don't have to become big preachers ourselves to go out and convince people. You just have to simply give them a book. They may not, read it right away, or they not be the one that reads it. They may take it home. Someone in their friends or family will read that book. And we've seen, over the course of the years, this Hare Krishna movement has been existing over 50 years. And we can see how it has changed already. The environment in America has changed. Because I remember before I became a devotee, I was a vegetarian, and people were thinking that is very strange, very weird. How can you live like that? You're not going to get your protein or whatever. It was considered to be unusual. But nowadays, it's so accepted. People realize, if you tell them that you're vegetarian. People think, oh yeah, I wish I could do that. And now these ideas of karma, everyone knows the concept of karma. I remember when I was working in a travel agency, sometimes you take a phone call and you had to adjust somebody else's itinerary that they had done. So you really don't get any credit for that. You don't get any points or commission. But they used to say, yeah, you do that for that person, and someone else will do it for you, That's the karma. So they have the idea of karma and reincarnation. People know about. So, and why has it changed so much? Just because Prabhupada's books is affecting society, and it will continue to for the next 10,000 years. To eventually, Prabhupada said, these books will become the law books for society. So it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. Just like when Krishna told Arjuna to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra, he said these people, they're already going to die. It's already determined. You just have to take credit. So the same way, the world is going to change. We just have to perform our duty and take the credit for something that's already done by Srila Prabhupada. So we can stop here. Anybody has any questions, corrections?
Whatever we say that there is a, not progressing, if you see, first time in the history, we have crossed more than $100 trillion economy. And the people, those who are below the poverty is only 100 million people, from almost 6 billion to 100 million. So there is a progress always. The technology has given us advantage to reach wherever we want earlier, to preach everything. So there are so much advantage also. It is not only disadvantage.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, I appreciated you pointing out many of the faults in Kali Yuga, our society today, because oftentimes, because we desire things to be okay, we, kind of like an ostrich sticks its head in the ground, we kind of look past the many, many faults that are happening. And similarly, it reminded me of in college, they're no longer teaching in environmental classes that we have to prevent the degradation of our environment, but now we're just getting ready for what's happening, what we've already done. We're just trying to prepare to be able to tolerate it. So similarly, as like in Kali Yuga, we have a Vaikuntha bubble in Iskcon where we have some feeling of relief. We have relief from these distresses, but we ourselves should still be preparing to take deeper shelter so that we can provide shelter for others, because Kali Yuga will continue to progress in a large way throughout society. So we should be strong enough to help people.
Yeah. So many people actually are suffering because, like, I had one of my coworkers, he's going broke just because of medical bills. And, other countries in the world, like in European countries where they have health care for all of its citizens, they look at America and say, they feel bad. You know, the government doesn't even care about its own citizens. Medical bills are the number one cause of bankruptcy in the U.S. So, yeah, some people are greatly increasing their wealth, whereas other people are suffering. Both things are there. That's why this is called Middle Earth. Sometimes you see there's people are enjoying, some people are suffering. Both things are going to be there. But it's all due to mismanagement. It's like America gives billions of dollars to Israel, and the people in Israel have full health care. That's your tax dollars paying for it. But for you, no, sorry. But all the politicians, they have full health care. No problem for them. They're not worried. So that's one of the symptoms of Kali Yuga, that people will take advantage of other people.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for class. I just wanted to say I thought the class was very interesting, and I liked that you talked about the realities of the world outside, because sometimes I know for myself it's just a good reminder, because I get caught up in this bliss ball of Krishna consciousness here, and sometimes we can forget what the world is really like. So I think it's nice, it's a good reminder to, for me at least, to go out there and remember what people are doing. So it makes things like Sankirtan just that more special and motivating. And speaking of, there is Sankirtan tonight, so hopefully we can all go. Yeah, I liked that. I think it's a good reminder as to what's going on.
Yeah, the people are suffering, and we have the cure for the disease. That's a material disease. Forgetfulness of Krishna. That's the real reason for suffering. There's other kinds of suffering they experience through the other living entities, or from their own minds, or from disease, from the demigods, natural catastrophes. They're suffering in so many ways. The real suffering, they experience it because they don't have this knowledge of how to end their suffering. Nobody's looking for suffering. No one's going to the pharmacy and saying, please give me COVID-19. No one's asking for it, but these miseries are coming, and they will continue to come unless we can solve the material disease. And as you said, we experience the bliss of being in association with devotees, and this will stop our suffering. Okay. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jaya. Srila Prabhupada ki